Hi, welcome to another episode of ARU Start-up Podcast. My name is Omkar Singh, and today we have our guest with us who is an entrepreneur, angel investor, author, and publisher, and honorary doctorate of business administration at Anglia Ruskin University, Peter Cowley. Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Omkar. Great to meet you. Great to talk to you.
Uh, I've been reading your profile. You have got a lot of work going on in the past. You have been doing some amazing work in entrepreneurship, in angel investment, and when I read through your website, your work you have done throughout your life in enterprise and entrepreneurship, it is really inspiring. And would like to know more about who is Peter and where did all your journey start from?
that's a long story. It's something that we can't cover completely, but I must point out that I'm just writing a self-help memoir book called Public Success, Private Grief. And there'll be a link to that in the show notes of this podcast. So in a nutshell, brought up in the north of England, studied rather too hard at school, ended up here at Cambridge University, engineering and computer science, worked in software for a bit, but I'd already been entrepreneurial because I'd set up and run a traveling discotheque here in Cambridge. And then I worked for a software company in London, but I still wanted to be entrepreneurial. So I actually moved out to Bavaria in southern Germany near Munich in 1980, so a very long time ago, and worked for somebody else and then set up my first business, proper business, technology business back in 1981. So I've been a technology entrepreneur now for 42 years. During that route, though, I decided the business Cam Data, which I still run, it's 40 years old, though it's had ups and downs. And if you ever read the Investor book, you'll see those ups and downs in there. I diversified in many ways. So I've got into property, so I speculatively built some houses, I did some refurbishment work. I got into charity trustees, so I've been chair of a number of charities in drug and alcohol and advice and education. And then about 15 years ago, while still being an entrepreneur, I stumbled into angel investing and really embraced this and loved it because I'm spending time with people of your sort of age, people who are about a generation younger than me. Most entrepreneurs I back are somewhere between 23 and 40 or so. Although it's a very, very risky business being an entrepreneur. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. And angel investing is also super risky as well. Many businesses fail. I just embraced it in a way that I really loved. I've always said that if I got all my money back that I invested plus £1, I'd be happy. I've been more successful than that, and you can see that on my website. And I've been on many boards. And then I decided I wanted to scale myself rather than just mentoring 1-to-1 or lecturing 1-to-25. So I've written a couple of books with my son, who was actually at ARU, had an economics degree at ARU. I'm just writing another book. So in a nutshell, a busy, interesting, complicated life.
Oh, thank you, Peter. So what was the age when you started your first business, and how did you thought of starting or going into a business, leaving your employment? Was it tough or was it easy transition?
So the first business I did, I bought this traveling discotheque here in Cambridge. In those days, a DJ was just somebody who put discs, literally discs, onto a turntable. And we did quite a few gigs here in Cambridge, and then we sold it again after a year. So that was being entrepreneurial in a tiny way, just, tiny way. And then when I formed the company in Bavaria, that was sort of forced on me, which it is. I was 25 years old then, and the company I'd gone to join in Bavaria was going bust. I didn't know that. There was no internet. There's no way of checking that sort of thing. And it sold itself to a manufacturer of machine guns called Heckler & Koch. And I and one of the other employees, or one of the directors, decided we didn't want to work for Heckler & Koch. So we set up a competitive business. So it was done out a combination of, I really wanted to have my own business, and I was sort of pushed over the line by events outside my control.
Yeah, usually we come across students here at ARU, undergraduates, when they try to step in entrepreneurship or maybe in the future in the journey. They say it is a bit of challenge to go into self-employment, and the transition is not very smooth. So from that perspective, how do you see the difference between when you started your journey at 1980s? How is that 25-year-old young entrepreneurial mind is different to today's 25-year-old?
Yeah, huge differences. I mean, the internet has made a massive difference to all our lives. It means that one can advertise and publish and distribute products and services without actually having to build a building or build something else. I'm just at the moment getting a logo done, for instance, for my new website, and that's being done in California through a website called Fiverr. So I can just put out something that could never have been done in those days. So it's very, very different. Being an entrepreneur then was less common. The amount of entrepreneurs that want to be entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs and actually do become entrepreneurs, is probably about 20 or 30 times what it was in the early 80s. In those days, equity investment, angel investing, etc., there was hardly any of that at all. It was happening to some extent in the States, but not over here. So if you needed some capital to build a business, you had to go to family and friends and the bank if you could possibly do that. So availability of capital was less. So marketing was much more difficult. Availability of capital was less. It was quite unusual. But can I just pull you up on something you said? The difference between going freelance or self-employed and being entrepreneurial in a business, limited company, is quite different. And the difference is that if you go freelance, you're generally selling your own services as a software engineer or as a product designer or as a hairdresser or something else, where you'll get customers quite quickly, either customers that you already know or customers that you can get to. So you're actually bringing income in quite quickly. Whereas if you're setting up a business that's a company that's designing a product, you need a lot more capital to get to the point when you get customers, because you need to develop the product and then you need to develop the market as well. They're very different ways of looking at things. Yeah. Both risky, of course, both risky. There's both risk involved in both. But the person who wants to be entrepreneurial needs to understand the difference.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So we have a pitching competition internally here in the university for all the students across the campuses we have. And we do have investors come on campus during pitching competition, the final round, when students pitch their idea. Not exactly, but something similar to the Shark Tank or the Dragon's Den kind of concepts. From your perspective, you're an angel investor. How do you judge a business? What do you see a first thing? Is it something that you go completely advanced about the business, or is the first impression is the best impression kind of thing?
No, neither of those actually. It took me a while. I've been investing for 15 years. I've invested in over 75 companies. As you say, I've had, as it turns out, they're all on my website, all listed on the website and why I believe they failed. So I've had 18 successes and 20 failures. And the successes have been financially a lot more than the failures have been, and I've still got nearly 40 businesses that are still trucking on and surviving, and some of them growing, some of them are not, etc., etc. Now, it took me about 3 or 4 years to realize it's not the business plan that matters, it's the people that matter. So it's the entrepreneurs that matter. And it's definitely a case, not just here in the UK, but throughout the world, that an entrepreneur will raise capital if they need to from people like me, much better if there's 2 or 3 of them, not just one of them. A sole entrepreneur, although there are plenty of examples of successful ones like Richard Branson and Mark Zuckerberg and various other names, actually raising capital is much easier if there are 2 of you. Usually somebody who's more commercially focused, and if it's a product business, somebody who's more technically focused. And it's the characters and the ability of those 2 or 3 individuals, rarely 4 or 5, that will actually be the deciding factor as to whether I'll be looking further at a business. And this applies not just to me as an angel, but all angels, all VCs are basing it on that, not on the technology or the market or anything else. Because as when one builds a business, one is having to dodge and dive, and the word is pivot. You might have heard that term, pivot. So some changes, so it's the ability of the individuals to be able to do that matters, not their original idea. Of course, they do need an idea and they do need a plan. Otherwise, we won't be giving them any money. Now, I'm just going to stop there and say this applies to entrepreneurial teams who are trying to raise equity investment. This is selling a bit of their business for money. I've always said to all entrepreneurs, the best money doesn't come from people like me, it comes from customers, because customers don't take any of your company, and it proves that whatever you're doing has got market fit, the so-called product market fit. So if you can build a business without external investment, please do that, because you won't have the hassle of trying to raise money from people like me and possibly being turned down, or likely to be turned down, and also us being part of your journey and helping you when we can, but at the same time owning part of the company. The issue is, if you're going to do something where you get customers straight away, you need something, a product or service, available immediately so that you can sell it to a customer, which is what I was saying about being self-employed and selling a service of some form. It's really difficult to sell a product immediately. If you take the extreme example, say you're designing a new drug, you can't sell the drug before you've designed it and checked for safety and whether it works or not, etc. That could take years, which is why, you know, drug discovery companies require huge amounts of capital. So all I talked about in terms of entrepreneurs really matters more if they're raising external funding. If they're just setting up a business to, and I don't mean just in the wrong term, but if they're setting up a business which is going to grow because of a service delivery, then obviously it's important that they are able to sell and that they understand the market and everything else. But it's less important that I would, or an angel would accept them as a team.
Yeah, I've come across these lines before, but directly coming from an experienced angel investor, it's impacting me more. So I think it's more weight about the actual founder or a co-founder who is looking for an investment. So when you say who are the people are more important in a business, can I ask what personality then you see when you say people important more?
There are certain parts of one's character is very difficult to change. The two most important things for me, and I've often lectured to entrepreneurs about this, is that they are honest with themselves and therefore with others, so they don't lie about something in their past, or they've got when they've got a business idea, it must be based on faith that they can get to something, they can grow a business, but they shouldn't tell untruths about their past, because if we find that out, we'll work out that they might tell untruths in the future. So be really honest about where you've got to and everything. That's the first point. The second point is that they must be able to listen. So although they need to be really focused on where they're going, they've got to listen, not necessarily to a grey-haired bloke like me, but listen to others, listen to the market, to listen to their staff, so they can pivot if necessary. The Americans use the word coachable, so they've got to be coachable. So those are the two primary personality traits they need to be. But on top of that, of course, they've got to understand their market. They've probably got some background in it, which is why it's unusual for an undergraduate to actually have enough experience of life, unless they're a mature student, of course. But a 20-year-old or an 18, 19-year-old to actually be able to build a business, because they haven't got any experience of business. They haven't got any experience necessarily of the problem they're solving, because of course in the end there'll be something, the business is being built on solving some problem. Hopefully it's not just a problem that they're going to do something cheaper, it'll be because there's some other way of doing something, some intellectual property of some sort. So yeah, they must know that. And then in order to come back to the hustling that we talked about a moment ago, they've got to be able to sell stuff, really, one of the two. They don't both need to. The technical person could be a back office person and could just be typing away, generating software or something like that, or in a laboratory. But one person must be able to sell something, and that's the charisma of that individual. But to go back to what you mentioned earlier on, the first impressions, not necessarily right at all, because a very good actor who's very charismatic on stage, who can sell well, won't necessarily be able to deliver. And there's some, plenty of quite big examples there. Some, the FTX guy at the moment, Elizabeth Holmes, there's a number of examples where somebody was very capable of selling the vision without being able to execute what they were saying.
Yeah. Thank you. And when someone is approaching to angel investor for funds for capital investment, uh, what are the few things that they should be prepared mandatorily before approaching?
The best way to do it, because you're better off approaching a group if you can find an angel group than an individual angel. If it's an individual angel, then people do put money in, but it's usually family or friends. And before you approach that group, you've really, as an entrepreneur, you're much better off approaching a member of the group and then discussing it with them, so they have buy into the concept of what you're wanting to raise the money for, and they'll probably mentor that process to make it easier to get to the point where, when that first pitch occurs, and I'm not talking about crowdfunding here, I'm talking about pitching to angel groups, that the opportunity is likely to be the reaction is likely to be more positive from the rest of the angels. So get some early mentoring. That investment readiness, they called, can be done, of course, but on an official program, and I'm sure ARU does investment readiness programs. But if you're going in to approach a group of some sort, and there are about 70 groups in the UK, get hold of one of the group first, either face to face, whatever's necessary. This is hustling as well, to get a bit of time from that, and then lead that into the angel group. So that soft introduction makes a huge difference to the ability of a group of angels to invest.
What are the channels for someone to approach? Is it through networking? Is it through our own contacts? Is it through direct cold contacts? What do you prefer from your perspective?
Yeah, so ignoring crowdfunding, where you're just putting something up on the website with a video, and they're not angels really, they're just early stage investors. An angel, in my view, is somebody who also helps the company grow. And if you've got a whole load of crowdfunders, unless they're champions and they've got a consumer product, and they're promoting that, then they're not going to help much at all. Although the real help you need is in growing the business and recruiting and all the other things. So a soft introduction is important, as I said, and the way to do that is to somehow get to one or more people who are in the group, and you do that by, as you say, by networking, by direct emails, but that might not work. So the best way to do it really is to speak to somebody at an event. Maybe they're a judge on a panel, or maybe they're just there anyway, and you identify them. So you've had a chance to chat to them. I invested in a company here in Cambridge that's in, it's actually porous semiconductors. And the guy came up to me at an event in the Bradfield Centre, actually, in Cambridge, about 4 years ago to start the process. And from that, I introduced them to the group, etc., etc. And another little fact is that if you take the 20 so new investments that the Cambridge Angels, which is the biggest group here in Cambridge, do each year. It's a bit less this year, but generally, I think on average only one has come in directly into the website. The other 19 have come through a soft introduction.
Any particular incident or a story you remember about investment, which actually did not, something interesting about investment that you have done?
Oh my goodness. As in positive or negative, or what? What do you want to know?
Something interesting. It can be positive, it can be negative, but something interesting.
Lots of things. My most successful investment, let's just talk about that. There's a company called James and James. They're both called James. They were both students here at the university. They set a little technology business, which was to do with something called a warehouse management system. And when they approached the Cambridge Angels, they didn't need any money. They didn't need any equity, because they'd already got to the point where they'd got product market fit. So they'd written some software, and they'd built this tiny little warehouse around it in a village south of Cambridge, and money was coming in. But what they did need was some advice in how to grow the company. So I joined the board, became chair, and I said, I'm only going to help if you're willing to sell me some shares. So we agreed I'd put a bit of money in, which of course wasn't needed because they were profitable already, and grew the business. And that sold about just before COVID lockdown, actually, for a valuation which was 100 times what I'd put in at. So I put some money in, and 6 years later, I get 100 times the investment, and it's gone on to much bigger things.
Oh, wow.
And that's a positive story, but they're not all
Yeah.
positive. I've lost lots of money as well.
Mm.
Most of the reasons that a company will fail, in my view, because of they've had external capital, is because they get to a certain point on the journey where they need more capital. Because if you haven't got profit coming in, you've got to get the money from somewhere to pay the salaries and everything else. And if you get to a point where you need more capital, but you're not being able to deliver what you promise you'll do, and you're over promising to start with, because you start a company we've got nothing and you're going to grow it, and at that point the investors lose faith, they won't put any money in. And if you haven't got to the point where there's profit being generated, then where are you going to go? What's the company going to do? It's either got to sell itself in a hurry, it's got to shrink down to the point where it can, it can run the business with the money coming in from customers, which could be a long way down, or it's got to go bust. So most of the time that a company fails that's had external investment is because they haven't found what's product market fit, i.e. they haven't got selling product or service to a market that's paying them enough money. So that's the usual failure. And if you look at my website, if you look down the list of all the failures, most of those are due to product market fit. Failure of product market.
No, thank you for explaining about the investments and angel investments. And I think we have got information about how to approach angel investors for the best channels that you suggest, and what are the most important things for a founder or a co-founder before approaching an angel investor. Having yourself a huge and rich experience in enterprise entrepreneurship general and as an investor, I know you wrote a letter to yourself, to your 29-year-old self, which is when I read that letter, I literally had a goosebumps, and it was very inspiring. Do you want to talk about that letter? What is it about? And yeah, I have questions. I have more questions on it. So do you want to just begin on what is the letter about, and why did you think it is important to write on a public domain?
Yeah, so I was asked to do a letter by a friend, Shirin, who's an Iranian female entrepreneur, technology entrepreneur, who built a software business and sold it. And then she joined a venture capitalist called Frog Capital. And while she was there, she asked a few people, including me, just to write a letter to their 29-year-old self. And it's on their website, and she's allowed me to put it on my website. And in fact, it's in the back of the book as well, the issue 3 of the book. And so if you look at it on, it's called Life Learnings on my website, and I'm sure you'll put a link to the website in the show notes. And I just put together a set of learnings, and I've got them in front of me here. There are about a dozen of them. We probably shouldn't go through them all, but just the headlines are, and I'll just run through them very quickly, but we won't talk about them all. Grasp opportunities. If you're entrepreneurial, you see something happening, grasp it. You might be wrong, and many entrepreneurs fail, but if you don't grasp that opportunity, if you don't take some risk to grasp that opportunity, you'll truck on through life, and which might suit you, but not if you're an entrepreneur. Secondly, luck is really important. And I've just been writing actually a chapter last night about one of the book chapters about the times when I was building 3 houses, and I was borrowing money from the bank, from my girlfriend, and I had, in modern terms, about £100,000 worth of credit card debt that I built up in order to fund the business. And then 9/11 happened in the States. And the whole world, I don't know how old you were when 9/11 happened, probably not that old, but the whole world went, what's going to happen? Are we going to get a global war? Are we going to get a financial meltdown or whatever? And it was really frightening, that. And luck definitely kicked in at that point, and I survived from that. Building a great team, really important. It's, once you've got your entrepreneurial people together, that you build good people. I think it's been said that the 2 Google founders, Larry and Serge, spent the first 2 or 3 years of their business life, spending something like 3 days a week recruiting. So only doing 2 days a week of real work, and the rest of the time is recruiting good team. Understand, a really important one. And if you look at my criteria for investing, although for the reasons of my cancer, I don't invest any longer. customer acquisition cost, lifetime value. The most important formula probably is, and just to explain it briefly, customer acquisition cost is the cost of acquiring a customer, advertising, sales staff, exhibitions and everything. And the lifetime value is the amount of money, of margin, not sales, you make out of the customer over a period of time. So if you're just selling one item, you've got acquiring a customer is quite fairly high possibly, and the lifetime value is just one transaction, which is why SaaS, software as a service, and subscription businesses do so well, because you're getting an amount like Spotify, Netflix, etc. You're getting an amount of money until the customer decides to do something else. So the cost of acquisition of a customer has got to be at least 3 times less than the money you'll get out of a customer. I got that completely wrong in my first business in CamData in the 1980s. I just didn't understand, and it was costing us more to acquire customers than we ever made out of them. That means you're making a loss on every customer you acquire, so you're better off not having any customers. It's really weird. Anyway, I won't go through the rest of them, but unless you want to, but those are just ones I've just picked out.
No, I mean, I'll provide those links to your books and this later as well in the podcast for our audience to read through and review. But I think, so do you think there is any one thing you would have told to your 29-year-old self that would have speed your process, your growth, that one particular thing?
One particular thing. Well, I would definitely have said, as I think I say on the website, go for it, give it a go, take the risk. I'll definitely do that. And from that, I've enjoyed a very interesting, full life by taking risks. Because I was at university in the 70s, most of my friends from that time are working in financial services, or they're working in law, or they're working in standard career, and they've been not necessarily the same organization, but they've done the same thing, gradually increasing in their career the whole time. Whereas I've dotted and dived all over the place, and I've had failures. Like I did a refurbishment of a 13th century cottage, lost a lot of money on it, but that's just one of those things. You've got to accept the ups and downs. But the most important thing, I think, that would have made my life better. I'm going to use one of them from the list on the website. And it's a phrase that I haven't made up. I haven't invented. It's out there already. And I'll explain it once I've said it. So revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is reality. So having high sales sounds great, but unless you're generating the profit from it, it's meaningless. Anybody can sell something below the cost of buying it. So say you buy a bicycle and you sell it for half the price. Your sales go through the roof because we all go and buy one. So we've got a big business that's got lots of sales, but you haven't got any profit. You've got losses. So revenue is vanity, i.e. something that you should not be proud of, but it's quite easy to be. Profit is sanity, because it's only with profit can you sustain a business. But in the end, ignoring those two, cash is reality. Cash, you can't pay the bills unless you've got money in the bank. So it's all very well building a whole business, even a profitable business, and generating invoices, i.e. sales invoices, but unless the cash is coming in, you can't pay for anything. So probably that one's the biggest. And I've made that mistake more than once, where I haven't followed that adage.
Yeah, thank you. I think the experiences or the stories you have shared, I think this is definitely going to add value and benefit to our listeners in their entrepreneurial journey. The next segment, which I'm going to touch about, which I think you publicly have already spoken about, is about your cancer. And you're also, I think, working on something related to a project related to a cancer. So what this project is about, and why did you think this is important running at this stage? How are you looking from this side of life to the other? How things are going on?
Yeah, I was very unlucky to get, I mean, lots of people get cancer. Maybe I'm slightly young to get it, but there are plenty of people of your sort of age who get cancer. And it was pretty frightening when I got it, which was about 2 years ago, because it was very late stage. It had already spread from where it started all over the body and into my brain and everything. And in fact, although it's not brain cancer, it was the tumor in my brain that was first showed me. I'd done the Cambridge half marathon, and 3 weeks later, the tumor was big enough that I couldn't really walk. I couldn't cycle any longer. So, of course, that period of the time at the beginning of last year, at the beginning of 2021, was very frightening, very, very frightening. However, I was lucky in that the type of cancer I've got, there's a really good treatment. It's a tablet I take once a day, which was actually invented by a company based here in Cambridge, AstraZeneca. And so they checked what cancer I had, started giving me the tablet started to work. I've been very lucky. I don't have many side effects, and I've done a huge amount of travel. I've traveled all over the world because I got a bit of money to do that, but also I'm healthy enough to do that. I've got married again, etc., etc. And about 6 months, initially, I just told people I knew, and I had it on my website, but behind a password. And then about 6 months later, I thought maybe I can help others in the same way I helped others with the entrepreneurial journeys and the angel investing. And so I became public. So I set up a YouTube channel called Project Cancer, which has got a combination of how I've coped with the various aspects of it, which are all going into the next book as well. And then I've done some interviews with other people, either because they've got cancer, one of their relatives got cancer. I've done an interview with my oncologist. I've done an interview with a spin out of Cambridge University, which isn't online yet. And then I've also put in the last few weeks, because my cancer mutated about a few months ago, and I had to have radiotherapy, something that was expected anyway, disappointing, but still expected. I put some videos up about how I coped with that. I'm hoping these are inspirational. In the end, it'll be the book that's probably more people will read and be inspired from, I really hope. But it's just, it's a sideline project just to help others. You know, I've spent an awful lot of time. I've mentored literally probably getting on for 1,000 entrepreneurs over the last 20 years or so. So, but I'm going to spend a lot of time concentrating on this book, because statistically, I don't expect to live beyond the end of next year, the end of 2024. Just because there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people on my journey on the same drug, and there's lots of studies done, and unfortunately, statistically, of course, I want to break the statistics. I want to live for another 25 years or whatever, but it probably won't happen. So I'm really putting a lot of effort into writing the book and then publishing it early next year.
Yeah, the work you have been doing even today in your capacity, and the book you're writing to enlighten the future entrepreneurs is inspiring. I hope everything goes well.
Right, so do I. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I'm, you know, I will fill my life with interesting things, both for myself, of course, and my wife and my child, Matt, and helping others where I can as well. It's just the way I'm programmed or wired is to help others. More so in the last 30 years, not so much before that when I was younger. I'm 68 years old now. So
it's really an honor for me to have you on this podcast. And I'm sure our audience will take most of this episode into their benefits in their own journeys of entrepreneurship. Any tips or advice that you would like to share with the aspiring entrepreneurs, those who are just thinking to go in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, Omco, you've been a great interviewer. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this podcast, and thank you for easing out of me lots of things which are really important to me. So thank you very much. I hope people are inspired both by what's on the website and in time, if they get a chance to read or listen to the book, that'd be great. For the entrepreneurs, I think what you've got to do, and I say this to angels as well as entrepreneurs, is understanding one's risk appetite. You've got to somehow work, very difficult for a youngster, but work out how much risk you're willing to take in your life. And if you are, try it. Just try it. There'll always be a fallback position, you know, unless you go bankrupt, which is unlikely, particularly if you take money from external people. So if a company goes bust, the entrepreneurs don't go bust. They don't go bankrupt. It's only the company that goes bankrupt, unless they've done something fraudulent, of course, which I've never seen. So it's just understand your risk appetite and then just try it. If you really want to get on, be entrepreneurial, try it. Even if it fails and you go back to normal corporate life, at least you won't regret that you hadn't tried.
Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today. It was really great to have you and great to listen to you. To all the listeners, audience, viewers, we have Peter's books will be made available in the collab space. You can just drop by and collect your copy. The links to the website, the books available on Amazon, or any links, the letter links, or all the references will be attached in the description below. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.